Panic erupts across Silicon Valley as DeepSeek, a Chinese AI company, sends U.S. tech stocks plummeting. We'll discuss this and more on this week's China Report. Welcome to the China Report, a new show produced in collaboration with Pivot to Peace. Every week, we'll be helping you sort through the propaganda with an independent view of the country that we're taught to hate, but know so little about. I'm one of your co-hosts, Amanda Yee. This is my co-host, KJ Noh. KJ, why don't you get us started with the headlines?
South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol indicted for insurrection. South Korea's impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol has been officially indicted for being the leader of an insurrection, a criminal charge that could carry the death penalty. Yoon's defense has claimed that his martial law declaration was legal and that the violent actions he commanded were just misheard malapropisms of the Korean language. More recent evidence has shown that Yoon's martial law plan involved provoking a kinetic conflict with North Korea. Le Monde Diplomatique, referring to drones launched into North Korean territory, stated that given that South Korea is more like a U.S. colony than a sovereign state, the fact that these flights occurred 3 times within a short period suggests at very least that the U.S. didn't object to South Korea provoking its neighbor. This refers to the fact that military drones launched into North Korean airspace would have had the knowledge, if not the explicit consent, of the U.S. Le Monde also quotes Stephen Cho, who argues that the U.S. plan was to draw China, a signatory of a mutual assistance treaty with North Korea, into a military quagmire that would weaken it.
China has accused the U.S. of bullying with its reinstatement of Cuba on the state sponsors of terrorism list. Trump had designated Cuba as an SSOT right before leaving office in 2021, and earlier this month, Biden removed Cuba from the list, only for Trump to return to office 6 days later and immediately redesignate it as an SSOT. This designation, coupled with the U.S. imposed blockade on the island, has created the worst economic crisis in Cuba in decades, with shortages in medicine, fuel, and basic necessities. In a daily press briefing last week, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiukun stated, repeatedly using the so-called list of state sponsors of terrorism to impose unilateral sanctions against Cuba is completely groundless. It fully exposes the U.S.'s hegemonic, domineering, and bullying nature. Guo then called on the U.S. to remove this designation and lift the blockade.
China plans to build solar power stations in space. Chinese scientists are planning to build solar power stations in geostationary orbit 36,000 kilometers above the Earth, and then transmitting the collected energy to the ground. These solar stations would be able to collect energy 24 hours of the day without being affected by weather, cloud cover, or the seasons. This follows on China's plans to build a 215-mile-long solar panel project in the Kubuchi Desert of Inner Mongolia, sometimes referred to as the Sea of Death for its harsh, inhospitable conditions. This project would generate enough power for a small European country and could also stimulate the greening of the desert, contribute to biodiversity, and prevent expansion of desertification. China currently produces more solar power than the rest of the world combined and is currently revolutionizing sustainable energy generation. It has written sustainable ecological development into its constitution.
China is one step closer to a vaccine treatment for breast cancer. Chinese scientists have developed a nano-vaccine from tumor cell membranes that they say has shown promise in treating an aggressive form of breast cancer in mice. The nano-vaccine is designed to boost the immune response of B cells, an abundant white blood cell found in tumors, which is known to have anti-tumor effects. When tested on mice with triple-negative breast cancer, an invasive form that cannot be treated with hormone therapy, the nanovaccine achieved a tumor inhibition rate of 89%, according to a paper released by peer-reviewed journal Advanced Materials last month. Well, big news in tech as Chinese AI company DeepSeek released its open-source reasoning model, which runs on par with Silicon Valley's ChatGPT. To discuss this, we're happy to join by geopolitical analyst Cyrus Jannsen. Cyrus, welcome to the China Report.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invite.
Well, we're glad to have you. Big news in tech. Yesterday, because of the release of DeepSeek R1, a lot of the U.S. tech stocks plunged, and I think Nvidia lost hundreds of billions of dollars. So maybe to start off, can you explain the significance of this DeepSeek news and how it's disrupting the U.S. tech industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing that we need to really understand is that this really came out of nowhere. It was not somebody, the United States tech industry, there's this assumption that, China's tech industry is dying, that they don't have the ability to innovate. This is something we constantly hear in Western media, is that China cannot innovate. And what's incredible here is that they have built this system that is on par. It's been independently tested. It is on par with OpenAI. The incredible thing, though, is that the output price is literally anywhere from 30 to 40 times cheaper than OpenAI. So it's completely disrupted it. We've always been told that the Silicon Valley tech companies need hundreds of billions of dollars to develop this AI tech. China did it in 2 months with a budget of less than $6 million. So that's why you saw the disruption in the tech industry yesterday. That's why Nvidia lost over $500 billion in market cap in a single day. I think that was the largest fall we've ever seen in a U.S. stock in a single day. But it's incredible because, basically DeepSeek is changing the game and has really opened up this entire tech industry to, really announcing that China is here. They're going to innovate, and they're certainly going to have a seat at the table moving forward.
Cyrus, I think one of the things which I think we can't highlight enough is the fact that they have released their model as open source. OpenAI, all the other American companies have been creating a moat around them. And the idea is that, if we have enough scale and if we have enough CapEx, enough investment, nobody will be able to catch up with us. It's literally, the biggest gorilla in the room wins. And this has completely undermined that assumption. They've released this as open source. Clearly, DeepSeek has said explicitly that they're not in it for the profit, that they're about research and about sharing this as a collective good. And I think that's such a contrast with American tech companies, which are these bloated and inefficient corporations, or have been shown up to be that in this contest.
Yeah, KJ, you're exactly right. I mean, what was incredible, there was a blog post from Meta, a group of engineers that had shared, exactly what's happening right now at Meta is that dozens of engineers are coming together. They're basically trying to break it down to understand what's going on. But they said, we've got a massive problem because all of our bosses and all of our leaders are on these inflated salaries, making millions of dollars a year. I mean, their salaries are bigger than what it costs to develop DeepSeek, which is insane. And there's dozens of such leaders, is what the blog post had said. And I think I really like what you said about open source. And I think what's so incredible about this story is that immediately we're seeing some of the biggest names in the tech industry. We had Mark Andreessen, who was, a legendary Silicon Valley investor, helped develop the very first web browser. He said, this is really, truly a gift to the world, that the fact that it's open source. And so you're starting to see these geopolitical barriers start to break down as well, where people are saying, hey, I don't care if it's from China. I don't care about, these lines that, okay, China can't innovate, or that, they're a different political system than us. It's like what they've created. This is a game changer. I mean, this fundamentally has changed the future of AI. And it's a remarkable thing, but it's something that, being open source, we all win. Like, this is a win for the world. And I think it's a huge feather in China's cap. And it really is an amazing start to 2025. For China and for the Chinese tech industry.
Yeah, another remarkable thing was that this model was developed despite the U.S. government's strict export controls that limited Chinese firms' access to these advanced semiconductor chips, right? Last week, we talked about the TikTok ban and how it spectacularly backfired on the U.S. government. This was a case in which this looming ban forced this mass migration of Americans to Xiaohongshu. And because of that, they were directly talking to Chinese people for the first time and really questioning U.S. propaganda. And now we have this case where the chip restrictions that Biden placed on China forced them to innovate. I'm wondering if we can pull up this Alexander Wang tweet. This was a tweet that he had posted right after the release of DeepSeek R1. Yeah, it says, DeepSeek is a wake-up call for America, but it doesn't change the strategy. USA must out-innovate and race faster, as we have done in the entire history of AI, and also tighten export controls on chips so that we can maintain future leads. Every major breakthrough in AI has been American. But as you responded to this tweet, and I'm wondering if you could talk a little about this, it was actually the export controls which resulted in this major advance in innovation on China's part, and it's challenging Silicon Valley.
Yeah, man, spot on. And what's so funny is I did respond to that tweet, and I said it's amazing because Alexander's a fantastic Silicon Valley entrepreneur, very smart individual. I said it's incredible you can be so smart but miss some of the most basic things. For example, what we've seen here is that the tech restrictions is exactly what has caused China to advance so fast, because they've been forced into a corner and they have to innovate. So China really is the best country in the world at doing more with less. And this is the best case study that you can examine. Yes, they don't have the most advanced microchips in the world. We all know that the United States actively sanctions and forbids these most advanced microchips, these Nvidia microchips, to be able to be shipped to China. They do not allow that. They basically keep that amongst, their tier one allies that they want to, really share that technology with. So we all know that China is cut off from this. So China is using older processors, they're using more of them, and they're reformatting them in a way that they can do these advanced computations. And that's exactly what China does. I mean, they're able to, like we say in Chinese, is 想办法, think of a solution. And, when they're presented a very difficult challenge, they're going to 想办法. They're going to think of that solution. And it's incredible because I don't really understand Alexander's point there, where it's like every advancement in AI has been American. No, I mean, we saw this week, this is from China. This is a huge advancement. And actually, you could find another dozen examples. I mean, France has contributed greatly to AI. I mean, there's many countries involved. So, to say that AI advancements only come from America is a very narrow-minded take. And honestly, this is where, again, you cannot restrict China's ability to innovate. They're going to think of a solution. And again, it's also a loser's mentality in my mind, because America, we are home to great ingenuity, great entrepreneurs. And, you don't go into a competition saying, how can I hurt my opponent? That's how I need to keep this lead. No, you go out and you work harder. You go work harder, you go put in the work. And, it's always reminded me of the space race between, the United States and the Russians. We weren't trying to figure out how do we get to Moscow and try to sabotage their plans. No, we just went to NASA and we just worked hard. And that's how we won the race to the moon, because we put in the work. So it seems like the United States has shifted strategies there. And, maybe it needs a little history lesson on what used to work in the past.
Speaking of the space race, another example is the fact that China was booted out of the International Space Station, and the U.S. refused to do any cooperation with China regarding space exploration. And within years, the Chinese had built their own space station. And this has led to something of a meme among, the Chinese public. They've been asking, the U.S. government to sanction their soccer team so that their soccer team will improve. That under the conditions and constraints, they simply do better. But coming back to this notion of doing more with less, I think there's some very interesting innovations that this program did. I mean, the history of math is simply, a large part of the history of math is simply making algorithms and methods more efficient. I mean, this is why we have logarithms or Fourier transforms. But what they did was they took 32 floating bit numbers and they used 8-bit numbers instead. They were doing multi-tokens, processing multi-tokens at once. They were using specialized experts. Instead of using all 671 billion parameters, they were using approximately 37 parameters. And then, of course, this results in this 95% cost saving, which is extraordinary. But the fact that they put this out to open source also points out that they don't see this, or that it's not that the way that the U.S. frames it, which is a U.S. versus China contest, but it's really a contest between open source and closed source. And we saw the effects of that during the initial microcomputer revolution. But I think that even a better way to frame this is a contest between win-win and zero-sum. And I think China is showing the way that when you do open source and when you work for win-win, that benefits everybody. And that is what ultimately wins the game, rather than this kind of enclosure and zero-sum and very conflictual approach towards business.
Yeah, it's very interesting that OpenAI, is actually not very open at all. It is certainly more closed than DeepSeek, which is, as we've established, is open source. And again, I just want to keep hitting that point home that this is truly a win for the world. I think the entire world is going to benefit from this. It is open source, so it is China's kind of gift to humanity. And I think if we look at China's track record, I think they're very much interested in building these win-win partnerships around the world. I mean, we kind of get this false message from the United States and the United States media that China wants to dominate the world. They want to take over. They want to turn everybody communist. They want to impose their will on everybody around the world. I don't see China doing that. China is very interested in ruling China and trying to figure out how do we take care of 1.4 billion people, and how do we advance our own economies, and how do we solve the many problems that we have in our own country, like every country has, right? But it is trying to work together, and you see the partnerships that they've done with the Belt and Road Initiative, which is incredible, over 150 countries around the world, billions of dollars or trillions of dollars of investment rather. And it is always this interesting win-win opportunity. And I think that's really, there really can't be a winner in AI. I think that's also a really important point to note. The interesting thing is that the battle between the future of AI is interesting enough. It's Chinese Americans versus Chinese in China. So going forward, whoever's going to be wanting to dominate an AI or become an AI player, they're going to be doing with Chinese people. And so, I mean, China's, they have a record number of patents now in AI every year. And I mean, they're certainly going to be a very, very major contributor. But I think I love what you said there. I think by turning it to open source, it really does send a message of let's build a win-win for the world.
Yeah. I mean, this seems like a really like a moment of reckoning for Silicon Valley, and it exposes something fundamentally rotten about the way that it's captured politics, right? DropSite released an article about this, and, they explain there's like this kind of unspoken agreement between Silicon Valley and the U.S. government, and that the unspoken agreement was that we would make a handful of U.S. tech CEOs unimaginably wealthy in exchange for building a U.S. dominated tech sector. And what did the tech CEOs do? They took that money, they built these tech companies with the help of the federal government and the Pentagon, built this dominant position for themselves, monopolized tech, killed the smaller firms, killed any kind of innovation through the smaller firms, and even enlisted the U.S. government to sanction China and restrict their access to this technology, right? But that begs the question, why do these tech companies need billions of dollars in investment? Why have we made these CEOs so wealthy, the wealthiest men in the world, when this Chinese model was developed at a fraction of the cost, a fraction of the time, works just as well as anything that Silicon Valley has developed? And it really feels like this model, this Silicon Valley model, has really restrained innovation. And it also feels like, a missed opportunity between the U.S. and China, a missed opportunity for collaboration, because China is leading scientific research in the tech sectors. And I don't think there's any way we can advance without collaboration with China.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's something that I speak about quite often on my own YouTube channel, where we talk about, when the United States and China work together, the whole world's going to win. It's really, does the United States want to have that approach? And I think what this is a very strategic move from China. I think the other thing is this was released on January 20th, which was a very pivotal day. Obviously, that was the day that Donald Trump came into power, and it was almost a signal to say, look, under the Biden regime, you really sanctioned us. You really tried to hold us back from developing. But by the way, buckle up, because, as you start your new administration, we've got some pretty cool technology here that is going to fundamentally change the future of Silicon Valley and the tech industry, because, these walls have been broken down. And all of a sudden, the whole message that, hey, you need hundreds of billions of dollars. These tech CEOs need to be making, billions of dollars. They need to be the most wealthiest men, because only they can do it. And all of their leaders underneath are getting paid millions and millions. I mean, the whole system is, falling apart. And I think it's a good thing, because it's better for, like you said, these smaller companies, the more innovation, and this, again, being open source. So we just can't keep stressing that. I mean, we keep coming back to that point, but that's truly the game changer. That really has changed the entire game. But I think it's a great moment for China. I mean, this is off to a great start for 2025. I mean, you did mention earlier the red note and Xiaohongshu, phenomena, which has already opened up millions of people's eyes to the fact that, hey, China is very different than what our Western media typically presents China, right? They present it as a dystopian place that's terrible, no freedoms, just awful. But all of a sudden, we're interacting with millions of Chinese, and we've got a whole different perception of the country now. Now, this is kind of like a 1-2 punch from China. And what's so interesting, I mean, China's government did nothing to earn like this soft power win. They literally did nothing. It was the United States that sanctioned TikTok and said, hey, we're going to shut down TikTok, which forced Americans to go over to Red Note and make this amazing discovery. And then, of course, you follow it up 2 weeks later, and people are thinking, wow, China, what a great start for 2025. You're the snake for China. I mean, this has been a really great start. And again, I mean, I think all of us, would like to see a world where, the United States and China are working together. I mean, again, when you have these bright minds in America and Silicon Valley working with the bright minds and entrepreneurs in China, I mean, that you're going to have some incredible technology developed.
There have been allegations that, quote unquote, DeepSeek, is churning up Chinese propaganda, which ignores the fact that you can simply download it and run it on your own platform without any, prior influence. But I asked DeepSeek itself, who are the good sources to get good information? Who would you consult for accurate information about China? And it was fascinating because it gave me a kind of an internal monologue of how it was thinking through that things. And it says, information about China can vary widely depending on the source, given geopolitical tensions and media narratives. And then it suggested, to go to original sources, but it also warned me that the Chinese government perspectives may omit criticisms or controversial topics. And then it said I should consider Western think tanks, but also recommended that I cross-reference them with non-Western sources, and then gave me some common pitfalls in terms of analysis. Watch out for bias awareness, watch out for language barriers, look for context, triangulate, contextualize, etc. So it was an incredibly helpful analysis, which I thought was incredibly fair-minded and, if we can use the word, intelligent. And I think that people who use DeepSeek are really becoming aware of how well constructed it is, and also how, effective it is. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I want to go back to that fact that I don't think a lot of people understand what open source means. DeepSeek operates under an MIT license, which means that anybody's able to download the model. They can fine tune it however they want. So even if you wanted to download it and you wanted to put out, anti-China, anti-communist propaganda, and really, that's the model that you want, you could do that. China, you have the ability to do that. So, that's what people don't understand, is that they often will say, okay, well, DeepSeek, it's it comes from China, it's going to censor sensitive topics. No, it's open source. That's the whole point. It's open source. You can download it and you can let it run the way that you want it to run. And that's a really key point that I think a lot of people are misunderstanding. What's unusual here is that really the kind of China haters and the people that are very skeptical about China, that's really their only point that they have to talk, because everybody realizes, again, once you go to Silicon Valley and you see the top CEOs in Silicon Valley, almost like, wow, this is pretty amazing. Like, well done, China. Like, you did something amazing. We have to kind of sit and remove our biases here, right? Some people are not going to like China. They're going to have a negative view towards China. But let's just look at, this is a software that China built. Wow. I mean, this is incredible, right? Let's just forget the political differences, looking at that just objectively. But again, some people with that bias, they're going to point to the fact that, okay, maybe DeepSeek is biased itself or has that. But again, it's open source. And that's the thing that we keep coming back to, operates under an MIT license. And, it truly is a gift for the world. I think it's an amazing thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just parenthetically, I would note that it actually seems to censor a lot less than ChatGPT regarding issues such as Palestine. I think
Right.
Andreessen was actually very correct when he said that this truly is a Sputnik moment, and
Yes.
that the benefits of this, as you've pointed out, are going to be extraordinary. They're going to allow individuals, countries, smaller corporations to get in on it and to really spread the wealth and the efficiencies that AI can bring.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And again, we can't stress enough the importance of it being open source. It's a major breakthrough, right? It means that researchers can now study the model and further build on top of it, rather than relying on these capital-intensive avenues of each firm building and training the models themselves. So it's a major advance in innovation. But Cyrus, thank you so much for joining the China Report. Maybe to end, could you let viewers know where they can find your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I also run a great YouTube channel, just like your great YouTube channel, and appreciate the invite. Absolute pleasure to speak with you both here today about DeepSeek and the future of China. So you can just look for me at Cyrus Jannsen. Just type that in on YouTube and you'll find me there. And look forward to connecting with more of you over on that channel as well.
I was thinking that, there are two types of key warfare against China. One is tech warfare and the other is information warfare. And Xiaohongshu has undermined that information warfare by simply showing people the truth about China. And DeepSeek has undermined the tech warfare by showing that it's completely ineffective.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think China could have thought of a better, start to the new year. And I mean, I think it's really good. I mean, even on my YouTube channel, I've had a lot of comments coming from people. There's obviously the China haters that have their own YouTube channel that portray every single thing, negative in China. And they're like, man, these guys are screwed now. How they've lost so much credibility over the last couple of weeks. I mean, I think the red note, Xiaohongshu phenomenon is amazing. I mean, that's something that was just so rewarding, especially for me, because I kind of, for the last 5 years, I've been really promoting, this U.S. China relationship and really trying to get more people to understand. And what's always interesting is how effective the American propaganda is. Like every single person, it's like, so what's it like having the social credit score? And like if you jaywalk, like you get points deducted from your account and then you can't buy anything in the grocery store. And I'm like, wow, I'm just amazed at how effective that propaganda has been, because like you all believe that. And you all know it. Like you just immediately spat that off as like, that's your first impression of China. And I'm like, wow, that's like some really effective propaganda. Because you know what? It doesn't exist. Like that literally does not exist in China at all. Like not even close. But I'm like, damn, again, that's like a case study of like how world-class the propaganda is in America. The red note thing was great, but it's definitely China's biggest soft power win. And I just love the fact they didn't do anything for it. They just sat back and let the US government ban TikTok, which was just wild. And I just can't even imagine, like, how do you go down the road of like starting to censor social media content? Like that's, I mean, your whole thing is like you're blasting China for censoring content. And it's like, we're going to start censoring content. Like, okay. Yeah, how's that going to work? So very interesting, though. No, really enjoyed the chat, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Cyrus. And thank you. I mean, everything that you have been saying for the past years has been vindicated, through this red note explosion. And I just want to thank you once again for being such a great, trusted messenger and, propagator of the truth about China.
I appreciate that. Well, we're going to keep working hard. I got a little jolt of energy the last couple of weeks, with all these great stories coming out. So, and I'm planning to go back to China this summer with the family. Oh. So I'm going to be recording a lot more vlogs and on the ground reports from China, which will be a lot of fun.
Tomorrow marks the beginning of the Spring Festival, or Chinese New Year. And to close out the show, we have a video courtesy of Visuals China on Instagram of the Yushen Parade in Fujian province. Yushen means wandering gods in Mandarin, and the celebrations are part of an old folk tradition in rural Fujian and Guangdong, where villagers carry large sculptures of deities and hold parades through the streets to pray for good luck. So that's this week's China Report. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.